The hunt begins. Run to God, Kristy.
Kristy is a 2014 horror movie about a college student named Justine who is alone on her college campus for Thanksgiving break, during which point a group of serial killers, part of an online cult, stalks and tries to kill her. Now, there are some movies that you can so clearly see the pitch for, and this movie is basically the exact same movie as The Strangers. The only difference is it happens on a college campus instead of in a remote location. I mean, that must have been it. I mean, it uses one girl instead of a couple, but it deals with the same type of isolation, the same number of killers, all wearing masks, with the same type of tendencies where they just kind of walk around like zombies and then just utter creepy little bits of dialogue. I mean, not to mention the ability to be anywhere at any given moment, which I will get to later, but you can clearly see sort of the genesis of this. I mean, this movie could have easily been a sequel to The Strangers. What this movie does do a little differently, though, is something that was a little weird around the early to mid 2010s. There happened to be several movies that came out that talked about the dangers of what the internet and online social interaction can do. There were movies like The Den, Open Windows, Unfriended, and this one does a similar thing where it sets up the origin of these serial killers as part of an underground cult that are tasked with hunting down what they call Kristies, which are virtuous, pretty young girls of privilege. Now, it's kind of silly though, because the motivation of them really means nothing. It doesn't really figure into the movie anyway. Like, if these were just three killers that were looking for pretty young girls to stalk and kill, it would have the exact same story and outcome. It's not like these killers are researching their victims and picking them specifically because of these attributes. They seem to just sort of find them at random. So, all right, for instance, early on it's revealed that Justin is there on a scholarship, and the reason she isn't going home for Thanksgiving is because she can't afford the plane tickets. So technically she doesn't fit their description, but because the killers spot her in a gas station with her friend's BMW that she borrowed, they think that she fits the bill. So why bother having the cult in there at all? Like, nothing would have changed except for the terrible internet tech montage they have in the beginning. I mean, the problem with all of this is they don't know anything about Justine. So it means there's so many things that the killers just happen to get super lucky on. It shows in the previously mentioned terrible opening montage that they're building cell phone blockers. Okay, whatever. But cell phone blockers have a very small range. I mean, that might work for a house or something, but it certainly won't stretch across an entire college campus. So when they follow Justine back to the college campus and decide and hunt and kill her, there are a number of things that they are completely banking on without any research. They're banking on that there are only two guards, that none of them have weapons, that Justine is literally the only person on campus, that they can be within a certain range of her at all times so she can't call with her cell phone, that they have the ability to cut the landlines of an entire college, which somehow they do. That the one person with a cell phone and a gun stupidly doesn't use either remotely effectively. That the college is doing maintenance that weekend and the lights will go on and off the entire time. By the way, who's doing the maintenance here? Like, the only people we see in the film are the two guards and Justine. If they're actively working on generators and lights and whatever, then where are these maintenance people? Like, lights don't just turn on and off on their own. They turn on and off because they have to shut certain sections down while they work on it. But we don't see any of them. So these killers somehow kill both guards, get onto campus, cut the landlines, then know exactly where she is at all times and can never call out for help. This is such a pet peeve of mine. These killers somehow always know exactly where the victim is, can always be ready to just jump out and take advantage of a surprise attack until they get into the room with them. Once they get in the room with them, then they have to search in the slowest way possible. Now, I love Friday the 13th and Halloween and movies like that, but I blame them specifically for this trope. Anyway, so Justine has to constantly avoid them as she runs throughout the campus, escaping them at every turn, until finally she decides that in order to survive, she's going to need to fight back. I will say the movie is shot well, and it does have some good acting. The actor Haley Bennett, who plays Justine, is really up for whatever task the movie asks of her, and she does it well. But there are so many conveniences that really stretch the suspension of disbelief, and it just left me rolling my eyes way too much. I mean, one of those things is the difference between setup payoff or just plain telegraphing. Now, setups and payoffs are great and they're necessary in most movies, but telegraphing is just an obvious nod to the audience that this is going to come up later on in the movie. For instance, there's a really good setup and payoff in this movie where earlier in the film, Justine's boyfriend is shown to have a tape recorder that he records stuff with for reasons, whatever. But then later on, he comes back to the campus looking for her and ends up getting killed, and she takes that tape recorder and uses it to distract her killers. Great, love it, on board. However, when it comes to telegraphing, we're shown in an opening montage sequence a couple of things. The only time we see her in class just happens to be when her teacher is explaining that the combination of these two particular chemicals will explode when water touches it. And then we're also treated to a bunch of scenes of her swimming so that you know that A, she's a good swimmer, and that there's a pool on campus. And then lo and behold, she mixes up these two hazardous chemicals and sets one of the killers on fire. And then, of course, at some point, she has to get into the pool to escape her killer. I mean, these setups are so specific and unneeded, it makes them stick out so much. Like, if she seemed to have access to chemicals, I'm sure there were already more hazardous chemicals in there without having to add water. And the pool was completely useless. Like, she kind of gets into the pool, lets her killer walk by, and then she gets out. Then she falls in again when she attacks him. Like, you didn't need to have several scenes of her swimming to set that up. Like, it just became more obvious that this was going to come back later. These are the types of conveniences that are the central problem with this movie for me, and why I would give it a C-. Like, despite some solid acting and some technical achievements, I just didn't buy its premise or execution, and that's not even talking about the audio jump scares, which are rampant. I mean, every time the light turns off, it is an audio event. But let me know what you think.